Passengers turned. Whispers started. Phones came out. But Dr. Amara Sterling, a black CEO in a Navy suit, didn't flinch. She knew exactly what this was and what she did next. It left an entire airline stunned. Asterisk, it was a busy Thursday afternoon at Gate A7. Dr. Amara Sterling, founder and CEO of a booming tech company, had just finished a whirlwind week of board meetings in Chicago. Her flight to Atlanta was supposed to be a quiet escape, a few hours of peace in first class. Earned through years of hard work and grit, she stepped up to the counter, handed over her boarding pass, and smiled politely. The scanner beeped green. But instead of waving her through, the young gate agent, Lisa Morrison, furrowed her brow. She looked again at the ticket, then at Amara, then again at the ticket. "This doesn't look right," she muttered suspiciously. Asterisk, without explanation. Lisa asked Amara to step aside. The line behind her grew longer. A murmur spread. A man pulled out his phone and whispered to TikTok, "They're stopping this black woman even though her ticket's legit. What's going on?" Amara stayed calm. She'd seen this before, doubt cast over her success, not because of what she did wrong, but because of what she looked like. Lisa scanned the card again. Still green. Still not satisfied. Then came the worst part. "We need to verify this isn't a stolen card," Lisa said loudly. Heads turned. Amara's chest tightened, but her face stayed still. With quiet strength, she replied, "Take all the time you need." Meanwhile, passengers watching started filming. Social media lit up. The comments were clear. This is discrimination. She deserves better. Just as security was about to arrive, a passenger zoomed in on a business card that had slipped from Amara's wallet. Dr. Amara Sterling, CEO, DS Holdings. A hush fell. Asterisk, 15 minutes later, after a wave of public outrage online, the airline staff apologized and asked her to board. But Amara, with the same calm voice, said, "Not until your policy changes." She made one phone call to her legal team, then another to her PR manager. By the time the plane was ready to taxi, Flight 1247 was grounded not by a storm, but by a woman who refused to be treated like she didn't belong. Amara Sterling didn't yell. She didn't demand. She simply stood in her truth, and sometimes that's the most powerful way to change everything. Asterisk, subscribe to Burn Stories for more real stories of courage, class, and quiet power. It all started with one unexpected moment, the cold, sharp voice of a flight attendant cutting through the busy boarding line at Chicago O'Hare. "Ma'am, you need to step aside. This is first class." The tension in the air was immediate. Every passenger turned to look. Phones started to click. A black woman, well-dressed in a navy suit, standing with a briefcase, was being questioned, as if she didn't belong in the very place she had paid to be. This was not just a ticket issue. This was about far more than a flight. This is the story of how Dr. Amara Sterling, a powerful black CEO, kicked off her flight during boarding only to take control of the situation in a way no one saw coming. Asterisk, it was a typical busy day at Chicago O'Hare International Airport, with announcements echoing over the loudspeakers, families rushing toward departure gates, and solo travelers glued to their phones or laptops as they waited for boarding. Air buzzed with the rhythm of modern travel people juggling suitcases, coffee cups, and time. Among them, at Gate A7, stood Dr. Amara Sterling, a poised and elegant woman in her early 40s, dressed in a sharp navy blue pantsuit that carried quiet authority. She wasn't flashy. Her presence didn't shout. It whispered influence. She was the CEO of DS Holdings, a rising tech conglomerate that had recently closed deals across 3 continents. Her face had been on magazine covers. Her voice had been quoted in Wall Street boardrooms. But to anyone passing by, she looked like any other traveler waiting for Flight 1247 to Atlanta. Yet behind her calm eyes and subtle smile was a woman who had spent her life proving herself twice as capable just to be seen as equal. The first-class ticket in her hand was more than a boarding pass. It was a symbol of decades of struggle, resilience, and triumph. For her, it wasn't about luxury. It was about dignity. She had earned this seat not through privilege, but through perseverance. This flight was supposed to be a short break after months of non-stop travel. A quiet pause before her next round of investor meetings. But as she stepped forward when her group was called, placing her ticket on the gate scanner, strange tension filled the air. The young gate agent, Lisa Morrison, scanned the ticket. It beeped green. Then she looked up. Her eyes flicked to Amara's face, then back to the ticket. Her expression shifted ever so slightly from neutral professionalism to visible doubt. She scanned the ticket again, still green, but her face now held confusion. Then came the words that would change everything. "Ma'am," she said, her voice firm but polite, "I'm going to need you to step aside. This is for first class passengers." The words weren't yelled, but they cut through the hum of the terminal like a whistle. Passengers around them paused, heads turned, some eyes narrowed, some widened. Dr. Sterling blinked once, but said nothing. She offered a gentle nod and stepped aside. "Of course," she replied calmly. Her voice was composed, but inside, a familiar knot tightened in her chest. She had been here before, not in this exact situation, but in the 1,000 smaller slights. The 1,000 unspoken questions about whether she belonged in the rooms she walked into. Lisa glanced again at the name. Amara Sterling. She swiped the black American Express card Amara had used to purchase the ticket. The system accepted it. Twice. Still, Lisa's unease didn't fade. She turned to her colleague, whispered something, then looked back. "We're going to need to verify this." "Isn't a stolen card," she said, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Amara's brows lifted just slightly. The crowd was now watching more closely. Phones were out. Cameras rolled silently as the energy at Gate A7 shifted from curious to concerned. "Take all the time you need," Amara said, gently placing her monogrammed leather briefcase marked discreetly with the initials DSH beside her feet. She stood perfectly straight, not angry, not pleading, just waiting. Waiting for the moment when the world would reveal its assumption that success and blackness couldn't exist in the same body without suspicion. Some of the passengers had started whispering. A middle-aged man in a gray blazer frowned and stepped out of line, pulling out his phone. "Hey, TikTok," he whispered. "I'm Ed O'Hare. They just pulled this black woman out of the first-class line, even though her card scanned twice. She's calm, but it's weird. She's dressed like a CEO. I think she is one." In another part of the gate, a younger woman named Maria, traveling home after visiting her parents, opened her Instagram Live. "You guys, you need to see this," she said, pointing her phone at the scene. "They're accusing this woman of using a stolen card for a first-class ticket. But she's just standing there, quiet, strong. I don't know what's happening, but it feels wrong." Inside, Amara's mind was racing, but her face showed nothing. She had learned to control her emotions like a thermostat, never too cold, never too hot, just enough to keep moving. Lisa, meanwhile, had dialed internal security. "Hi. Yes, this is Gate A7. We may have a potentially fraudulent first-class ticket. Can you send someone to verify a credit card?" Her voice trembled slightly, not because she was scared of Amara, but because something about the whole situation was starting to feel off. Still, she had already made the call. Now she was committed to it. Dr. Sterling stood silently, clutching her red leather portfolio marked "Board Meeting Confidential." She could have made a scene. She could have demanded a manager. She could have raised her voice and quoted her Forbes profile. But she didn't. Instead, she let the cameras roll. She let the silence speak. She let the world see what it looks like when dignity stands alone in the face of doubt. After several minutes, Lisa returned, eyes lowered. "Ma'am, do you have any proof of employment?" she asked. Amara tilted her head slightly. "Are other passengers required to present this information?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. "No, but in this case," Lisa began, but stopped when she saw the expression on Amara's face. Not angry, just tired. The kind of tired that comes from constantly having to explain that you earned your place in the room. As Amara reached for her ID, a business card slipped from her wallet and fluttered to the floor. One of the TikTok viewers zoomed in. Dr. Amara Sterling, CEO, DS Holdings. The chat exploded. Comments flooded in. "That's the CEO I saw on LinkedIn last month. She gave a TED Talk. This is disgusting. Let her on the plane." 15 minutes had passed. Internal security never came. But the pressure on the airline staff was building fast. The video had gone viral. Influencers were resharing it. Business leaders were tagging the airline. Then came a direct call from Delta's internal corporate relations department to the gate. Let her board. Now. But Amara didn't move. Not yet. Lisa turned to her with an apology on her lips, but Amara raised one hand gently. "Before I board," she said calmly, "I'd like confirmation in writing that your team will review this protocol, that it won't happen to another passenger who looks like me." Lisa didn't know what to say, but someone from corporate was now on the line with a promise, an internal review, a public apology, and immediate policy revision. With that, Amara finally walked forward, collected her briefcase, and boarded the plane. As she walked past the other first-class passengers, some averted their eyes, others nodded quietly. One woman whispered, "Thank you." She took her seat too, by the window. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply opened her portfolio and began reviewing notes for her next board meeting. Back in the terminal, the flight was delayed. The airline had to pause boarding. The system flagged and issue internal accountability, someone said. Officially, the delay was technical. But everyone at Gate A7 knew the truth. Dr. Amara Sterling didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She didn't throw a fit. She just grounded an entire flight with grace. The story, of course, made headlines. 8 CEO grounds flight after a discrimination incident. Read one. Another said, "Power, grace, and a boarding pass." How one woman changed airline policy in 15 minutes. But Amara never spoke to the press. She didn't need to. Her story spoke loud enough, and somewhere, someone watching that video learned something valuable. That real power doesn't always roar, often whispers, and when it does, the whole world listens. The moment Dr. Sterling handed over her boarding pass, she felt a subtle shift in the air. The flight attendant, a young woman with a badge reading Lisa Morrison, looked at the pass for a few moments longer than usual. Her eyes narrowed. There was a brief flicker of hesitation before she turned to Dr. Sterling and said, "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside. This is first class." Dr. Sterling was taken aback. Is there a mistake? She had paid for a first-class seat, and there was no reason why she shouldn't be boarding. But Lisa's tone made it clear that something was off, as Dr. Sterling stood. Still, waiting for an explanation, the other passengers in the line began to take notice. Phones started to appear. Conversations grew louder. People began whispering. "What's going on?" one of them asked. "Kaya, is she being kicked off the plane?" Kana murmured. The young flight attendant swiped Dr. Sterling's boarding pass again. Then, again, but each time her frown deepened. "This doesn't look right," Lisa muttered, loud enough for others to hear. The murmurs grew louder, swirling through the terminal like wildfire, restless, charged, and laced with quiet disbelief. Yet in the center of it all, Dr. Amara Sterling stood composed, her expression calm, her posture unshaken. She didn't shift uncomfortably, didn't glance around for validation or defense. She simply looked at the gate agent with a kind but firm expression and said, "I understand your concern. Please take all the time you need." There was no trace of panic in her voice, only the quiet certainty of a woman who had faced rooms filled with doubt before and left them in awe. Slowly, she lowered her briefcase onto the counter. The leather was a deep brown, polished to perfection, and discreetly monogrammed with DSH, a subtle nod to the empire she had built, DS Holdings. That case had traveled with her to summits in Dubai, round tables in Singapore, and tanks in Berlin. It carried board presentations, keynote scripts, and letters of acquisition. But here, in this moment, in front of strangers who knew nothing of her journey, it was just a case belonging to a woman too successful to fit into their expectations. Her phone vibrated with a rhythm that signaled urgency, probably her executive assistant wondering why she hadn't yet boarded. Probably updates from her investors or check-ins from her media team who tracked every public interaction. But she didn't reach for it. Instead, she kept her hand steady and in view, a silent demonstration of patience. Amara Sterling wasn't new to pressure. She had negotiated multi-million-dollar acquisitions under tighter scrutiny than this. She had walked into boardrooms where no one looked like her and walked out leaving them changed. This humiliation in front of dozens of strangers. This questioning of her identity wasn't new, but it never got easier. Every time it happened, it carved a little deeper. Not because she didn't expect it, but because she always hoped. Maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to justify her presence again. Lisa Morrison. The gate agent seemed younger now than she had when she'd first spoken. Her confidence had started to erode beneath the growing eyes and phones. She looked at Amara, then at the screen, then back at Amara. The card had scanned green twice. The reservation was valid. But something in her mind didn't add up. Instead of questioning her own bias, she questioned Amara's legitimacy. Clearly unsure of what to do next and unwilling to make a decision on her own, Lisa picked up the phone and called internal. "Security. This is Gate A7. I need someone to verify a potentially fraudulent credit card," she said, not lowering her voice, not attempting to handle the matter discreetly. She said it as if it were protocol, as if such a public display of suspicion was part of her training. For Amara, this moment was no longer about a flight. It wasn't about Atlanta or rest or meetings. It wasn't about schedules. It was about something far heavier. This wasn't a customer service error or a misunderstanding over a seating arrangement. This was the assumption so quick, so confident that she didn't belong in the front of the plane. That despite her composure, her attire, her credentials, and the verified transaction, she needed to be vetted. That something about her blackness, just didn't match their idea of first class, and it was all happening in public. That made it even harder. Because public moments of doubt have a way of spreading. Every glance becomes a judgment. Every silence becomes an endorsement. But Amara wasn't one to crumble. She knew the eyes were watching, not just the passengers, but the phones, the live streams, the digital crowd growing by the second. She wasn't going to show frustration. She wasn't going to make their story easy to twist. She was going to stand there, perfectly still, and let the truth be seen. She had done nothing wrong. A few feet away, Jake Chen, a young man in his late 20s wearing a hoodie and backpack, had paused midway through sipping his coffee. His brows furrowed. Something felt wrong. He opened TikTok and began recording. "Guys, I'm at O'Hare and something wild is happening," he whispered, pointing the camera at the gate. They're questioning this black woman's first-class ticket, even though it scanned fine. Like, she looks more successful than anyone here. What is going on? The comments began to appear within seconds. What airline is this? Classic racial profiling. Keep filming. Don't stop. A few feet further down, Maria Santos, a marketing manager returning from a family visit, started her Instagram live. She didn't say much, just let the video roll. She didn't need to narrate. The image spoke for itself. A woman who had done everything right, being treated as if she had done something wrong. Lisa still hadn't hung up the phone. She kept glancing back and forth, her face reddening slightly as the awareness of the moment sank in. She wasn't just handling a customer issue anymore. She was now part of a growing viral moment. But still, she stayed the course. Security. We'll be here shortly, she told Amara, avoiding eye contact. Amara inhaled deeply through her nose and exhaled slowly. She could feel her heartbeat, not from fear, but from restraint. She had been taught long ago that when black women show anger, they are labeled aggressive. So she kept her voice smooth. Her chin lifted slightly. Her power, she knew, wasn't in how loudly she spoke, was in how unshaken she remained. Around her, the passengers grew more vocal. A white woman whispered to her husband, "Why are they doing this to her?" An older man muttered, "That's just wrong." A few people began recording Lisa now, too. The camera lens was no longer a shield. For the airline, it was a mirror. Then came the next blow. Lisa returned with a question that hung in the air like smoke. "Can you provide proof of employment, ma'am?" First-class tickets are expensive. We just need to be sure. A gasp escaped someone nearby. A woman clutched her chest. Of the question was stunning not because it was loud, but because it was so casually asked. As if Amara had just stumbled into the wrong gate. As if success demanded extra verification when it didn't come with the right look. Amara didn't respond right away. She let the question echo. Then, slowly, she tilted her head and asked, "Are other passengers being asked to show employment?" Verification. Her voice remained calm, but it carried weight. The kind of weight that forced silence. Lisa stammered, "No, but..." In this case, she trailed off.